Did King Charles II of England spend his time as king trying to get a high score in the Test Act, or trying to use the Habeas Corpus Act on his mistress, Nell Gwyn? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I am Professor Jerome Arkenberg, and I have been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the acts of both the Convention and Cavalier Parliaments, the origin of the word cabal, King Charles II's many mistresses, the Great Plague of 1665 and the Great Fire of 1666, the Great Popish Plot, the origins of the words Tories and Whigs, the Second and Third Anglo-Dutch War, and yet another rising by Scottish Covenanters. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe on that little bell thingy so I can continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. In April of 1660, the Long Parliament finally dissolved itself, and new elections led to the Convention Parliament, which invited the return of Charles II to the throne of his ancestors, on condition of his acknowledgement of the right to religious freedom and recognition of the Civil War land settlements. The Convention Parliament then abolished old feudal dues in return for a guaranteed revenue stream for the government, restored Anglican bishops to their dioceses and the House of Lords, while re-establishing the Church of England in all its glory, indemnified all political acts committed between 1637 and 1660, affirmed the validity of all acts of the Long Parliament to which Charles I had assented, reaffirmed Oliver Cromwell's settlement of Ireland, declared King Charles I a holy martyr, and had the bones of Cromwell and the other regicides exhumed, burned, and scattered, and disbanded the army except for 5,000 men. So, on May 29th, 1660, his birthday, King Charles II, whom I like to call King Chucky, entered London and was crowned king. Now, due to his own craftiness, the weariness of the people of England with Puritanism, and secret subsidies from France's King Louis XIV, King Chucky, by the end of his reign, mostly succeeded in instituting divine right monarchy. The elections which followed the dissolution of the Convention Parliament reflected a tide of pro-royalist feeling in the country, and the Cavalier Parliament repealed the Puritan prohibition on games, dancing, gambling, and theater. People wanted to have fun. They were tired of living the Puritan way. The Cavalier Parliament also enacted that all magistrates were required to abjure the Solemn League and Covenant, swear loyalty to the king, and be in good standing with the Church of England. All clergy and students were required to conform to the 1662 Book of Common Prayer. And finally, 3, all non-conforming dissenters were prohibited from holding meetings of more than 5, except in a private household, or from coming within 5 miles of any town or city or any place where they had once ministered. Now, despite the presence of a cabal of ministers, and the word cabal was a word that was put together from the initial of the last names of Charles's 5 ministers. In other words, Clifford, Arlington, Buckingham, Ashley, and Lauderdale. So instead of having to write that out every time, just put it together as C-A-B-A-L, cabal, and that was good enough. Anyway, King Chucky ran his own government primarily, even though he preferred to spend time at the races at Newmarket or in the brothels of Covent Garden. King Chucky also lived extravagantly, supporting a wife, 6 mistresses, and eventually 20 illegitimate children, but no legitimate children. Here are his mistresses: Diana Kirk, Frances Jennings, Barbara Villiers, Dorothy Brownlow, and most famously his most famous mistress, the one he really loved the most, Nell Gwyn, and the Frenchwoman Louise de Keroualle. Interesting story. At one point during an especially anti-French feeling running across the country, in the town of Norwich, a crowd had heard that Louise de Keroualle was in a passing carriage. So they mobbed the carriage. They began to shake and rock it back and forth, back and forth. Turns out it was not Louise de Keroualle inside. It was Nell Gwyn. She climbed up on the top of the carriage and proclaimed to all the people, "Greetings, greetings! Stop, good people, stop, good people! I am not the king's French whore. I am the king's English whore." And all the people go, "Huzzah, huzzah!" and gave her a big round and treated her to the keys to the town. Here is Chucky's wife, Catherine of Braganza. In May of 1602, after he married her, he got the best, in fact, he of anybody got the best marriage dowry of all time. England received Portuguese Bombay, which becomes the foundation of English power in India until 1947. Charles then sold the last remaining city that England controlled on the continent to France for £400,000. This was Dunkirk. In 1665, the Second Anglo-Dutch War, which lasted from 1665 to 1667, broke out, in which the English were repeatedly beaten by the Dutch. The low point was the burning of the Royal Navy's base on the Medway in 1667. You see it here on this map. It was a sad, sad day. But the war nonetheless ended well for England when its forces took Antigua, Montserrat, and St. Kitts from Holland's ally, France, and then got the city of New Amsterdam and the entire colony of New Netherland in exchange for a small island in the East Indies, now named Eye. Why? Because in this area, Holland wanted a complete monopoly on the spices in this area, notably nutmeg, mace, and cloves. And at the time, these islands produced more, 100 times more than New Amsterdam, which of course will eventually become the city of New York. Meanwhile, England suffered through 2 disasters. The first being the Great Plague of 1665, which, though destructively deadly, was nowhere near as severe as the Black Death of 1348. Then, in 1666, the Great Fire burned for 5 days through London, gutting 450 acres, destroying 13,000 houses, some 89 churches, including St. Paul's Cathedral, which was the largest Gothic church ever built, and goods valued at £3.5 million, which is, in today's money, $1.2 trillion. Here, of course, is a map to where it starts, and all this area was burned. A few little areas out here, and the tower unscathed, but virtually everything was burned to the ground. That same year, the Scottish Covenanters rebelled yet again, but were crushed at the Battle of Pentland Hills. And yet another uprising was no more. From 1672 to 1674, England fought the Third Anglo-Dutch War, which, like the Second Anglo-Dutch War, went badly, only serving to make William of Orange, the Dutch stadtholder, turn English opinion against the French, forcing King Chucky to assent to the 1673 Test Act, which excluded all non-Anglicans from public office. Notably, it was really designed to make sure there are no Catholics in office. And here's why. This meant that the king's brother and heir, James, the Duke of York, seen here, and the Lord High Admiral was excluded from office, forcing James to resign all his offices, after which he openly confessed Catholicism and married the Catholic princess Mary of Modena in 1677. One of the most striking features of Restoration England was its virulent anti-Catholicism. Even though Catholics were no more than 5% of the population and politically quiet, because just about everybody else in Britain thought Catholics were constantly plotting to use Irish and French troops to restore Catholicism, and that part of this plot, Catholics set the Great Fire and spread the Great Plague. This showed up especially in what comes to be known as the Great Popish Plot of 1678, when two thieves, Titus Oates and Israel Tongue, attempting to escape hanging, alleged the discovery of a Popish plot to kill the king in conjunction with a Catholic uprising and a French invasion. Here is Titus Oates in the pillory. This sent England into paranoid hysteria and panic, as rumors swirled that the French and Spanish had landed, that black riders had been seen at night, that the Catholics were arming, that bombs were under every Protestant church, and that the Irish had landed and were marching on London. Panic hit London especially hard, but everywhere Catholic homes were searched for weapons. Militia patrolled the streets. Chains were put across major streets to impede traffic, and Catholics young and old rounded up and imprisoned. A few thousand were executed for a non-existent plot. Yes, you heard me. It was totally non-existent. Eventually, the hysteria died down. Oates was arrested, convicted of sedition, and given a fine of £100,000, which is unbelievable. It's almost like $1 trillion today, and thrown into prison. And upon the accession of King James II, he was convicted of perjury. That's all they could get him with. But since there was no death penalty for perjury, instead, Oates was sentenced to be whipped all across London twice. You see him in one of the occasions being whipped with the birch rods. and imprisoned for life, and then taken out and put in the pillory every year for the rest of his life. However, as part of the glorious revolution in 1688, Oates was pardoned by the new king and queen, William and Mary, and given a pension of £260 a year, which was increased in 1698 to £300 a year, which is really putting him into the upper middle class. Oates died in 1705 in complete obscurity, but a wealthy man nonetheless. The end of King Charles II's reign was consumed with the question of whether the Catholic Duke of York, James, should be excluded from the throne, with the Tories supporting the king, while the Whigs argued against a Catholic monarch through pamphlets, political clubs, and meetings at the brand new coffee houses. Yes, here is a Whig meeting at a local Starbucks in 1680. Coffee finally had made its way to England. Now, Tories. Why the term Tory? Tory was an insulting slang term for the Irish. And the term Whig, this was an English insulting slang term for the Scots. So each group were essentially insulting the others. One group calling them Tories, sort of like saying you damned Irish. Another group saying, oh, you Whigs, you damn Scots. Then, of course, each of them adopted the insult term, as the name of their own party. Odd. But fears of civil war. The Scots rose again in 1679, but were defeated at the Battle of Bothwell Bridge. Along with King Chucky's political cunning, the French subsidies, and the discovery of a Rye House plot. Yes, a real plot to kill the king on behalf of the Puritans kept the country resigned to James's succession. Because the fear was, let's go back to the civil wars again, and nobody wanted that. But on the morning of February 2nd, 1685, King Chucky suffered an apoplectic fit and died 4 days later at the ripe age, for the time, of 54. And having sired no legitimate children, though he said he had 20 illegitimate ones, was succeeded by his brother, the Catholic James II. The wrap-up quote. This fatal night, about 10, began the deplorable Great Fire of London. There was nothing heard or seen but crying out of lamentation, people running about distracted, without attempting to save their goods. Such a strange consternation there was upon them. The fire burning both in breadth and length the churches, public halls, the exchange, the cathedral, hospitals, monuments, and ornaments, leaping after a prodigious manner from house to house and street to street, at great distances one from the other. For the heat devoured after an incredible manner houses, furniture, and everything. God grant mine eyes may never behold the like, who now saw above 10,000 houses all in one flame. The noise and crackling and thunder of the impetuous flames, the shrieks of women and children, the hurry of people, the fall of towers, houses, and churches, was like a hideous storm, and the air all about so hot and inflamed that one was not able to approach it, so that they were forced to stand still and let the flames burn on, which they did for near 2 miles in length and 1 in breadth for 5 whole days. John Evelyn, 1666. So, let me know what you think of this quote in the comment section below. Also, what you liked about this video, and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos. And click on that little bell thingy so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.